All right. Okay, with our huge group tonight, but that's okay. We can tailor it even just to you guys. And like Kirsten just said, it's recorded, and we will upload this to our YouTube channel. So if you have patients, clients you work with, any families who you think would benefit from this talk, please share widely. We want this information to get out. My name is Carissa Hodgson, and I'm a family therapist, oncology social worker. For the past 11 years, I have been a program manager at Gilda's Club Madison, where I oversee all of our kid and family programs. And part of what brought me to Gilda's Club is that my father had lung cancer when I was 7, and my stepfather had liver cancer when I was a young adult. So working with families who are navigating a cancer diagnosis is something that's really important to me, because as you'll hear throughout the presentation, when a cancer diagnosis happens, it happens to the whole family. It's just not one person. So it's really important to include the kids. I'm also the co-chair of the Association of Oncology Social Worker Special Interest Group for Youth, Families, and Children, and an instructor at the UW-Madison School of Social Work graduate program, teaching a class on grief. So that's just a little bit of my background. And I am going to get our slide set going. Okay. Oops, not sure. Okay. So just what we're going to talk about tonight. First, I'm just going to review family systems, talk about resilience. You can't really talk about kids and cancer without talking about resilience. A little bit about what kids do understand about cancer, how to talk to kids about cancer, especially in this time of COVID, and everything else that's going on. Talking about big topics like racism, police brutality. It's all sort of happening at once. And so a lot of this information is actually really relevant to all of those topics. Tips for answering common questions, how to help kids, and then leave room for your questions and also pass along some resources. So I think most of us really understand this. I like this depiction of families. So this is actually a mobile that was made at one of our Midwest Young Adult Cancer Conferences by young survivors. And it's a great representation of what a family is like. And when something tugs on a piece of this mobile, of course, the rest of it moves, right? And that's exactly what happens in a family. And so when one of these pieces, one of these people is diagnosed with cancer, it's going to tug and move and shift every other person that's attached to it. And that's why it is so important to include kids and teens in conversations about a parent or loved one's cancer, because they're going to be thinking about it. And I know that a lot of parents think that, it's best to just shield their kids, especially young children. I hear a lot of parents say, I think they're just too young to understand. And truly, all kids, even babies, will pick up on shifts in a family. So it's really important that we are including our kids in these conversations. I have a colleague that always used to say that cancer turns up the volume of what's already there. You could say the same thing about COVID or anything else that's going on, any big stressor. And so, a lot of times we'll have parents come in and say, I have so much going on in my life. And I thought getting this cancer diagnosis would sort of be like a get out of jail free card. Like, why can't all of my other problems go away so I can just focus on the cancer diagnosis? Well, unfortunately, that's not how it happens. It actually makes every other stress in your life feel more stressful. And so I think it's really important just to remind yourself that to be gentle, that this is a difficult time, that everyone is under a great deal of stress, and we just need to be gentle and patient with ourselves. So what we know, and the research continues to validate this, is that kids are resilient. Kids really do get through hard times. And there's one researcher, Dr. Boyce, who has a relatively new book that talks about kids being either a dandelion or an orchid. And about 80% of kids, he says, are like a dandelion, where they really grow and thrive in almost any environment. They will find a way to propagate and grow and be healthy. About 20% of our kids, though, are a little bit more like an orchid, and they need a more specialized environment. They're very, very sensitive to what's going on around them. And we need to be a little bit more sensitive to those needs and be a little bit more careful in order to help them thrive. And really, all of these kids, regardless of being a dandelion or an orchid, will thrive. You just need to sort of know your child and how sensitive they are. And I think that's another piece that I'll continue to repeat, is that parents are experts on their children. So they really will know what's best and what each of their children will need in order to get through a cancer diagnosis. Often when parents come in, the first thing that they say, almost 100% of the time, a parent will say, I'm diagnosed with cancer, but my primary concern is, how are my kids going to get through this? That makes sense. Parents tend to put their kids first. And not only can kids get through it, they truly can grow through a parent or a loved one's cancer diagnosis. And, we've done a lot of anecdotal research as well as actually gathered data, and found that parents say the same thing. As awful as it is, and though no parent would choose for their child to have to experience it, there are silver linings and there are growth opportunities. And I think if these three key pieces are in place, kids can grow. So as long as kids know that they're safe, that they're loved and cared for, as long as they're treated with respect, which includes honesty, that's a primary component, and connected with support as necessary, they will do well. They really will. And we've seen that over and over again. And I say that right up front in this presentation because I think parents, caregivers, they really need to hear that, because they're so worried that they're going to do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing. And really, it's sort of this simple. A couple of quotes that I just really love. Children are resilient. The life force burns brightly in them. With our help, they can bounce back from even shocks that might devastate an adult. A child can live through anything so long as he or she is told the truth and is allowed to share with loved ones the natural feelings people have when they are suffering. The greatest gift you can give your children is not protection from change, loss, pain, or stress, but the confidence and tools to cope and grow with all that life has to offer them. And lastly, our job is to walk with our children through their difficult moments with connection and empathy, allowing them to feel, to be active participants in problem solving, and to discover the depth of their own capacity. It's out of our deep love for our children that we want to protect them, but their capacity will be greater if we allow that love to lead us to our own courage so that we can feel strong enough to let them find their own strength. So another thing I want to consider and want you to consider about children is where they're gathering information. We all are getting an overwhelming amount of information throughout the day. And it's one thing as an adult to process that, but it's another to think about our children and where they're getting their information. So I just don't say that to freak parents out, but certainly I want them to know that that they should be checking in with their kids and asking questions about, whether it's about COVID or about cancer. Gosh, what have you been hearing about COVID? What kind of information have you heard? How are you feeling about that? I told you last week about mom having cancer. What are you thinking about that? What have your friends been talking about? Checking in with them and sort of getting a pulse on what they understand and what they're processing, I think is really important before you jump into giving them tons of information. Number one, you want to clarify any misinformation. You want to give them the correct information, but also just again, see where they're at, because it's always good to start where they're at. So developmentally, of course, kids are going to be all over the page. You're going to talk to a 4-year-old differently than you're going to talk to a 14-year-old. And this quote here from a breast cancer patient and a mother even reinforces that. So even within your own children. We've even had it with twins. Parents telling us, gosh, I really thought my twin girls were going to react the same, but they were completely different. They were on opposite ends of the spectrum. One needed space, one needed to talk about it all the time. So this is another way that parents are experts on their kids. Keep, thinking about, what's your gut instinct? What do you know? What's worked in the past about how your child likes to process information? Do they prefer that you have a conversation about it? Would they rather you read books? Do they prefer to talk in the morning, at night, while you play, on a walk? These are the kinds of questions that you want to be thinking about. These next slides walk through development, what kids understand, and common behaviors and feelings. I'm actually going to kind of page through those pretty quickly because each person has children at different ages. But a broad statement that I'm going to make here that I said earlier in the presentation is that it doesn't matter how old your child is, even babies will pick up on changes in routine, the stress of a caregiver. So although you're not going to have a conversation with a baby, do pay attention that they can sense that something is different, which is why I say, once children can talk and listen, having very, very simple conversations with them, just to say, the word mama has cancer, is important so that they can understand that something is happening. They can start to put a concept around what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. Because if you do not address it, if you do not talk about it and you try to hide it, I will guarantee that kids will make up their own story. They will fill in the blanks. That is what kids do. And often, most of the time, what they make up is far worse than the truth. So parents, caregivers will actually help their children. Their children will do better if you talk about it rather than trying to hide it. With young children, it's important to just keep it simple. It's okay to use very short statements, stick to the facts, definitely avoid metaphors or euphemisms, keep it really factual. Dad has cancer. Dad is getting medicine to make him feel better. You don't need to overwhelm children with information. In fact, I like to say, start with less is more. And then follow their lead. If they continue to ask questions, then continue to answer them. Continue to just check in with them and ask questions about what they know and what they're understanding. Something that you'll continue to see in these slides about what children understand is this idea of magical thinking. So, magical thinking is when kids draw a correlation between like something they did and then something that happens that's not really true. So a great example in the world of cancer would be a child saying, I had a really bad fight with my dad, and then the next week he was diagnosed with cancer, and I caused him to get cancer. As you can see here, that magical thinking can exist through middle school. And truly, there is an element of magical thinking in all of us. I've worked with so many adults who have told me, gosh, I know it's not true, but I can't help but think, I had this terrible falling out with my mother, and then she was diagnosed with cancer. And just this part of me thinks, I think I caused it. So it's important to address that head on. The most important thing, you cannot say it enough to children, is nothing you did caused your loved one to get cancer. Continue to say that over and over and over, because there are going to be a lot of big feelings. And so even throughout cancer treatment, if kids are getting angry with mom or dad or grandma and grandpa, they'll continue to come back to this, and they'll feel guilty about, I know that grandpa's having a hard time going through chemotherapy, but I'm really mad at him, but I shouldn't be mad because he has cancer. And they'll continue to draw correlations between the two. So keep reinforcing that nothing that they did caused the cancer or is making it worse. Expect kids to regress a little bit, especially younger children hitting developmental milestones. You might have some kids who were potty trained that now start wetting the bed, or even older kids start sucking their thumbs. Any sort of coping mechanism that they used to have as younger children, they might revert to. So when you actually get to this idea about talking about cancer with your kids, it's really about open, honest communication. So 2 years ago, we gave our members a survey, our families, just to get information from them about their families, how they talked with their kids, and basically the resilience of their families. It was an open-ended survey, which is meaningful because the responses we received were written in. They weren't prefabricated sort of answers. And all but one of the respondents cited open communication as a key factor for their family getting through cancer. And 67% specifically wrote out that phrase, open and honest. So, that really is important, because if kids believe that you're hiding something and that you're not being honest with them, they're going to lose trust. And once you lose that, it's really hard to get it back. I love this Maya Angelou quote. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I included that slide in the slide deck because I talk with a lot of parents who get caught up on what exactly they need to say. Like they want a script. What exactly do I need to say? What exactly do I need to do? And when it comes right down to it, it's more important about how parents make their kids feel. Kids need to just feel safe. Kids need to feel like they're being included, that they're loved. The information will come and you will mess it up. I mean, it's a given. As parents, we mess things up, we make mistakes, and that's where we need to be gentle with ourselves. And as long as you keep coming back to just being authentic and loving your kids, it will be okay. So psychiatrist William Glasser talked about us as humans needing these 5 basic needs, and they build on themselves. So, number one, the first thing we all need is safety. And once we've established safety, we can create a sense of belonging. Once we have belonging, we have power, then we can experience freedom, and lastly, fun. So that is how I sort of broke down the rest of talking to kids about cancer, because I do think it's important to sort of build on what they need. So really, one of the most important things, truly, that I think is that parents need to have a plan. If you have children, there really should be a plan for what happens if parents were to die, if caregivers were to die. That is creating safety for everyone, certainly safety for children, but also for parents. And I work with a lot of parents who really resist this and say, thinking about it makes it real. I can't think about it. I can't do this. And certainly everyone needs to do what's right for them. But most parents have told me, even though they've really struggled with creating advance directives and creating wills, that once they've gotten through it, it's like a weight has been lifted. And they say, now that I know that everything's taken care of, I can actually just kind of put it away and be present and be with my kids. And I just don't have to worry about it anymore. Because it doesn't mean that you're going to die. It doesn't mean that you're terminal. It just means that you have a plan in place. Because a very common question that kids have, about 50% of kids, according to our survey, is, are you going to die? Is grandma going to die? The question is usually, is my loved one going to die? And if you're a parent talking to your child, to be able to really reiterate that they will always be loved and cared for means that there is a plan. And that doesn't mean that you can promise them it's going to be you. In fact, don't do that. Don't make promises that you can't keep. But to just be able to say, no matter what happens, you will always be loved and cared for. There's a plan. If I were to die and Daddy were to die, you were going to go live with Aunt Karen. That can be really hard to talk about, but it's a plan. And parents have told me how important that is. So once you've established safety, then it's about creating a team. It's creating belonging. No child can stand alone. Your children are part of a unit called family, and they will draw their strength from it as you draw yours. No child can make her own way through a family medical crisis. The children who emerge whole and healthy are the ones whose parents recognize how much of their children's emotional survival depends on them. So very true. One thing parents often say is, gosh, now that I've been diagnosed with cancer, I think I'm going to drop some of the expectations. It's okay if my kid doesn't clean her room. It's okay if my son doesn't really do his homework. They're dealing with enough. They don't have to do that. Not at all. One of the first things I talk with parents about is it's really important to keep routine and expectation the same. Number one, and most importantly, it creates normalcy for kids. And that's something that kids crave just in general, but certainly when there's a cancer diagnosis. Talking again about COVID, I've talked to so many parents, cancer or no cancer, who say, one of the hardest things adjusting to this new environment is a loss of routine. My kids don't know what to do. Their anxiety is through the roof. And it's actually not anxiety about, what's going on. It's about they don't know what to do with themselves. Their routine is completely upended. And that's another great example of how when we've lost that sense of normalcy, it's very uneasy. So trying to keep routines the same, keep expectations the same. Another reason for that is if, your teenage son sees that all of a sudden you don't care, that you can, his room is messy, that he's not doing his homework, they're going to start to think, oh my God, things are a lot worse than I thought. Like mom just doesn't even care. What's really happening? What's wrong? So there's an important reason for that. Roles might shift a little bit, and some of that is normal. Kids love to help. If they ask that to help, if you're going through treatment and you don't feel well, allow them to help, to bring you a pillow, to make you a snack. It empowers them, for number one. It teaches them empathy. So it's actually a really wonderful thing to include them. And that's important. Kids want to feel included, part of the process. Creating a support team, vital. No one really gets through this alone. So, setting up your own support team, if that's family and friends, if it includes neighbors, coworkers. But think about it not only for the adults, but for the kids as well. Kids also need sort of their tribe. So if you're able to connect them with other kids who understand, that's going to be a great outlet for them, whether it's through a formal support group, or even if it's that another family in the neighborhood or through school that also has a parent or loved one with cancer. If you can get them together or talking online, if that's appropriate, that's really helpful for them to have their own support team. Utilizing websites like Cancer Support Community has My Lifeline, there's Caring Bridge, lots of helping hands. Those type of resources really allow the primary person with cancer and the caregiver to delegate. And parents continue to tell me how important that is, that they need to let people help them. And often they have a lot of folks saying, how can I help? What can I do to help? And being able to give them very concrete, specific ways to help. I need you to make me this meal with these dietary restrictions. I need you to pick up the kid from school. I need you to take the dog on a walk. Being able to have a list of things that loved ones can do to help is really great. That peer support, like I said, not only important for kids, but the whole family, if you can get them connected to a community. And think about community in all the ways that your child is connected. So school is a great example. When school is in session and kids are actually going to a real building, there are great resources there. There are counselors and school staff, teachers, coaches, a lot of people who care about your child. Think about how they might be able to help if your child needs accommodations. Keep them in the loop. Although one thing I will say is that if you have older children, especially I'd say middle school and high school, have a conversation with them first about what they feel comfortable with their teachers knowing. Especially teenagers, they're at an age where they can be a part of that conversation and say, I'd like my teacher to know this, but not that. That's just part of respecting some privacy. So once we've created safety and belonging, this is where kids start to develop power. This is where we want a lot of the work to happen. We want them to feel powerful. And the two best ways for that is communication and tools to cope. Through all of these next ideas and interventions, take into consideration, of course, your unique child, their age, their development, what they understand, their personality. This drawing is one I really love. One of our kids made the Worry Be Gone in 8 or 5,000. So that's what they created. That's what their machine would look like if they were to get rid of all of their anxiety. So some general guidelines. Adults might want to prepare themselves before the conversation. So, I wouldn't necessarily recommend someone talking to their kids the day that they're diagnosed. You might just need to take a day, a week to breathe, to gather your own thoughts, maybe have your own conversation with a therapist or your loved ones. Some parents say they would rather wait a week or two so that they have more information. They might want to have their treatment plan in place. Whatever you need to do so that you feel in control and grounded, because kids will take their cues from you. So if you feel dysregulated, if you're out of sorts when you're having a conversation with your children, they'll start to pick up on that anxiety as well. Think about the timing of that conversation. So, right before bed, probably not the best. You don't want your kid trying to worry right before going to sleep. But, think about what typically works best for your kid. A lot of kids tend to do best side by side if they're engaged in an activity. Talking face to face with kids sometimes is a little threatening and off-putting. So if you're making a meal together, it's great if you're driving. They're in the back seat, you're in the front seat, you're having a conversation. Great way to engage in more serious conversations. Keep in mind that you're the expert on your kid. Each kid is unique and is going to be different. And don't be surprised to be surprised. We've had a lot of parents say, I really thought my kid was going to respond this way, and they responded that way. Huh, that was new. So, it's never ending what you're going to get. A physical presence can mean a lot. So sometimes the conversations are difficult, whether that's on the adult's end, the kid's end. But don't forget how important it can be to just be present for kids and teens, just to see you around. Little kind of, touches on the shoulder, little hugs. Those reinforce safety and connection. Continue to be gentle with yourself and your kids. This is hard. There's no textbook for this. There's, no guidebook. It's really just following your instincts and some good feedback from experts. Open and honest, that's paramount. And you're going to need to continue these conversations. It's not a one and done. So continue to check in with kids. You might need to be updating them with information, but don't think it's just, ripping off the Band-Aid. It's going to be an ongoing conversation. The 3 primary pieces of information you want kids to know: cancer is not your fault. Nothing they did or said made their loved one get cancer. Cancer is not contagious. So try to avoid using the word sick in describing cancer. I prefer just using cancer or calling it a disease, because sick makes it confusing, especially for young children when you're talking about cold or flu, or now with the pandemic and COVID, that's extra confusing. So just call it what it is. And you want to reinforce to your kids, no matter what happens, you will be loved and cared for. Let them know that it's a safe space to talk. Any questions, okay, you can ask me. You will be kept informed. So, you tell them enough, but not everything. I like that. And as there are updates, let them know that you'll be keeping them informed as you get updates. And let them know that you'll always be honest with them. Again, it's not that the expectation isn't that you tell them every nitty-gritty detail of what's happening. But you still need to be honest with what you are telling them. And if you don't know, it's okay to just say, I don't know. That's a good question. I should ask my doctor that. A lot of older kids in particular benefit from being included. If they're interested in coming to an appointment with you, coming to treatment with you, the 2 of you reading a book together, going online together to find reputable information. Sometimes it's nice just to include them. So some of the more common questions that children ask: what is cancer? This is where I love to pull out books. There's so many fabulous children's books on cancer. And even for older kids that might say like, I've outgrown picture books. Give it a try, because sometimes, especially some of the more science-based ones that have good images and pictures about cells, or there's a really great series on MetaKids that's like a comic book, that really appeals to some children and teens. But anything that really just gets the correct information in their hands. And like I said before, it can be short and simple. So for young kids, it just might be, mama has cancer. Cancer is a disease. You know, if they start to understand this, if wherever the cancer site is, you could say there's, you know, there is a lump in mama's breast. It's a tumor where cells have grown too fast. Mama is getting medicine to make her better. So you can keep it pretty simple. And as they're understanding it, you can expand on that if it makes sense. They kind of catch cancer, again, no, reinforce that over and over and over, no. If they ask about different types of treatment, there are some really great glossaries for kids that you can find online that simplify a lot of this complicated language. But again, it's even just using your own description. So, you know, what's chemotherapy? You know, it's a medicine that dad will be getting to kill the cancer cells. You know, radiation, it's a beam of energy that will try to kill the cancer cells. Surgery, we're going to cut out the cancer cells, the tumor. Losing hair is a really big one for kids. Kids tend to be a little upset about physical changes. And as much as possible, we want to prepare kids for physical changes so they know what to expect. Again, great books about this, but in general, we're just reminding them that medicine and treatments that kill cancer cells often kill other healthy cells, which makes mama be a little bit more tired. It might make her tummy upset. It causes her to lose her hair. These are things, you know, that we can say once the medicine is done, she will start to get better. This question about people dying, it very likely will come up. And if your kid isn't asking it, they're most likely thinking it. This is probably the most difficult question in conversation that parents have to have. And they tell me that all the time. And this might be a place where parents and caregivers want to seek guidance of a counselor, a therapist, just because it brings up your own fears of death and mortality, and it can be a hard conversation. What I found is kids tend to do a lot better actually than adults do in talking about death. And, you know, we live in such a death-phobic culture where people are afraid to talk about it. A lot of parents are afraid to talk to their children about it, even though we're surrounded by death every day. So, you know, I just think it's important that children talk about death as it happens out in the world and in nature, and seeing a dead animal, to talk about everything that lives dies. Certainly when it comes closer to home and it's about a parent dying, those are more difficult conversations. So if that seems like one that's hard, reach out for support. Can I talk about cancer with other people? That's a great question. And that's one that I like to turn back on the child and say, you know, certainly, like, who is it that you're wanting to talk to about it? Or maybe that's the answer to that will be, I don't want to talk about it. Well, then that's another great jumping off point for a conversation. Identify with your child some other adults in their life that they might want to talk about it. People at school, extracurricular activities, other safe adults that might be the people they want you to keep updated. Hope is kind of a four-letter word. I mean, it literally is, but it's certainly one that can get sticky. And I know that a lot of parents talk to me about how they're not sure how to navigate this idea of hope because it can be dangerous, right? A couple of great quotes on this matter. In the short term, hoping for a return to the status quo helps maintain resilience. Unrelenting hope that is static and rigid erodes resilience and health. And what I want to say about that is hope is a concept that can evolve. And we see this all of the time. So in the cancer world, everyone first hopes that the biopsy is going to be negative. And then if it's not, your hope evolves, it changes, right? And so then it's, I hope that my cancer, I hope that I'll be cured. And if it's not cured, sort of the hope changes to, I hope for a long remission, or I hope for a long life, you know, on maintenance. And then if that continues to change, it might be, I'm hoping for a good death. So even in the face of death, what are you hoping for? I hope that it's painless. I hope that I'm surrounded by loved ones. I hope that I leave a legacy. So hope doesn't have to be synonymous with living. You can hope even in death and after death. And so these are good conversations to have with the person with cancer and the other adults before they start to think about how to present hope to their children. which brings me to the next quote, which is, your children must be clear on the difference between what you hope will happen and what is likely to transpire. I'm a big proponent on, I alluded to it before, I don't like to promise kids. I don't like to sugarcoat. There's a way of being honest without being harsh. So it's really important to just be honest and then follow that up with loving conversations, lots of empathy, lots of understanding. And even though it might be difficult, it's likely a more difficult conversation for you as the adult than it is for the child, because we carry more baggage and sort of world experience and thoughts about it than the child does. Oh, I'm kind of a quote junkie. A couple more. The ability to create, resurrect, challenge, modify, and even renounce our hopes is as good as any definition of healthy as I have come across. So again, that idea of hope evolving. And then this is perhaps one of my favorite quotes. Life is not fair. Life hurts. Life is good. These three seemingly incompatible expressions are really three parts of the whole of living. They are threads woven through the tapestry each one of us creates as the visible expression of our being a part of humanity. To accept these three is not to abandon hope or optimism, or to deny our real grief. To accept them is to rid ourselves of the unnecessary suffering that comes from struggling against these three truths and trying to make them something they are not. Tools to cope. Children want to play. That is how they process. That is how they work through emotions. That is how they work through new information. Give them lots and lots of time for free play. That can be difficult when you feel stressed about a cancer diagnosis and your life might be upended with treatment schedules. But as much as you can, you want to give kids space to play. It's also great. So it's great to sort of observe it, give them their own space, but also to join in their play. It's a great way to get a read on what they're thinking. And keep in mind that a lot of their play is metaphorical. It doesn't mean that that's exactly what they're thinking, but join in, and try not to judge it too much. I've had a lot of play therapists, continue to remind me that what they're playing doesn't represent their reality per se. And as a parent, do your best to just drop your judgment and expectation and play with them. And you can always return to that play to then start a conversation about, gosh, I was wondering more about when when that dinosaur died, what was happening there? Or what were you thinking? Art is always a fantastic way to process our thoughts and feelings. Kids can do it on their own, also families together. I always encourage that. Families writing together, creating a family flag or crest together. What a great way to come together and everyone sort of have their own thoughts, feelings, and expressions and join it. These are some pieces of art from our kiddos. One is just a classic body tracing. That's a great way to get a read on what a kid is feeling. It's even better if you can get a giant piece of paper or cardboard and trace their actual body, and then have them either color in, or even better, draw pictures, use magazines for collages, and just have them portray what they're feeling in their body so that you can have conversations about where they're feeling things. Our broken heart was from a grief group, and kids feeling, pieces of their heart, how it was broken, how they were hurting, but then the Band-Aids represented what was healing and what brought them back together, what was support. So there are fabulous, fabulous ways to incorporate art into healing. Another thing I want to say about art is it also may be metaphorical. A great example of this is we had a boy in one of our kids support groups who, in drawing his family, drew a gun pointing at Dad's head, and he didn't want to share about the picture in group. And so after group, I just pulled Mom aside and said, just so you know, this is the picture, and perhaps he wants to talk more about it this week. And the mom called me later that week and said, wow, we had a great conversation as a family. I did follow up with my son, and when I asked him to share more about the picture, he said, this is Dad getting treatment. Well, Dad had a brain tumor and was receiving radiation. And the son had only heard bits and pieces, mostly just overheard his parents talking about treatment. And what he imagined was something very scary and very violent. And he imagined just like this really scary ray gun pointing at his dad's head. And so it led to a wonderful conversation, again, misinformation, where parents clarified what it meant. And even better, they were able to take their son to dad's next radiation treatment, where the staff were great about giving him a tour and showing him the machine and the masks. And the boy's anxieties really dropped off after that. So you might gain some really great information from your child's play and art. Emotions, are great to be processed through play and through art. A lot of kids, though, are very kinesthetic. Okay, they need to move. They need to do something with their body. So these are just reminders of things that kids can do physically to work through emotions. Lots of mindfulness, meditation ideas are great. But anger is one of those that I think we get scared of, especially as kids start to get older. We sort of teach them out of their anger. But our bodies like to get sort of angry, right? So giving kids safe ways to be angry, how to punch pillows. I love the idea of throwing ice cubes. I do that a lot with kids. If they like the idea of something breaking or shattering, that's a very safe thing, especially in summer. Bring out ice cubes, have them think about something they're really mad at that they want to break, and just have them smash ice cubes. Have them take a hammer and smash them to smithereens. Whatever they need to do to just get it out. Dancing when they're happy, encouraging them to cry when they're sad. And that's something that a lot of parents ask me is it okay to cry in front of your kids? Absolutely. Parents model for their children how to respond. I mean, kids really do take their cue from parents. So, it's okay to cry. It's okay to get a little angry. I think the best thing, no matter what you're feeling, is if as a parent or caregiver, you start to feel a little dysregulated. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but where the growth comes in is circling back to that when you do feel regulated. So the next day saying, gosh, how, I got really angry yesterday and I punched the wall. Well, I got some really bad news, and that's what I did in the moment. Probably wasn't the best way to be angry. I think I should punch a pillow next time. But I just wanted you to know that, that's how I was feeling. And then have a conversation based on that. It's really good for parents to show that they mess up. It's really important, actually. We need to be fallible human beings so that our kids don't feel like they can't be that way. They need to know it's okay to make mistakes, but then grow from it and do better. So mindfulness, all over the place. Yes, kids on their own, as a family. We've had a lot of families say it was wonderful to start incorporating yoga right before bed or guided imagery. That works for so many kids, especially with worries and having a hard time sleeping, to do a little bit of guided imagery before bed, make worry dolls. Some families said they created gratitude journals or sharing, and that all was very good. Information can be good or bad, right? Some kids, especially teens, might go to the internet and find information that might be misinformation. So if you have children that are going online, coach them through how to find reputable sources for information. So once they have power, they can experience some freedom. They get to have some just fun time, right? Freedom to be fun. And that's what we're getting to, is fun and cancer can coexist. That's a picture of one of our volunteers and his daughter when mom was going through treatment for ovarian cancer. She had this wig, and they had a great time making a snowman with the wig and had a great time, and they laughed. And that's what our family said on the survey, was finding time to laugh together as a family was really what got them through the hard times. A special note about teens, they might need some more creative and unique interventions. Being a teenager, that's an especially hard time to have a parent or loved one with cancer, because especially if it's a parent, it's the very time that they're pulling away from the family. They're starting to be more independent. They might be thinking about moving away. And then if a parent is diagnosed, they're pulled back into that family unit. They might be expected to do caregiving for younger siblings. So there's a lot of anger, resentment, guilt that's swirling around for teens. We've had some families that they said just talking as a family never worked. It always blew up. So they created a journal where they left out in a common space, and they would write to each other back and forth in that journal and ask questions of one another. And that worked for them. Post-it notes, whatever it is. Think about what works for your family and your teen, whatever it is that gets you guys communicating. It doesn't have to be verbal. So signs of distress, things you do want to pay attention to, is your child functioning? Look for disturbances in the big four, a major regression in development, problems at school, sleep or eating, if it persists for more than a couple of weeks. Other just persistent changes in mood or behavior. So lots of exploding or withdrawing, especially if it's sort of the opposite of what your child used to be. If your child has lost interest in activities, certainly any thoughts of harm to self or others, seek help. And also if you have a child, an older child in particular, who steps into that parent role a little bit too much, or even starts to become a surrogate partner, that's when you want to look for a family therapist that can help everyone reestablish healthy boundaries and roles in a family. When you're looking for support, you really want to look for a therapist who has experience with both cancer and kids, or teens if it's a teen. Play therapy, art therapy, all these sort of experiential therapies are going to work probably better than talk therapy. If you're working with a child, have a child who's experienced any kind of trauma, and that in the world of cancer can often mean a kid who watched a parent become unconscious. We've had a lot of kids who saw like an ambulance come to get their parent, or had to call 911. Those are terrible and very traumatic experiences for a lot of kids. So EMDR is a type of therapy that is really safe for kids, and it can help you find a therapist who can help them through that. If you can connect them with a peer support group, great, do that. See if there's any local group that provides a kid support group. CLIMB is another regional program that's throughout the US. If it has to be informal, again, if it's that you just know of a family in your area or neighborhood, connect with them, get kids connected with other kids. Don't forget about the school support staff, counselors and teachers. If you're connected with a faith center, clergy, medical team can be a great support, like I said, for field trips, being a part of helping your kid understand and giving them information. Child life is a wonderful profession that exists in most clinics and hospitals. And then summer camps. Camp Kesem is a fantastic national camp for kids who have a parent or caregiver with cancer. Right now they're offering it virtually. They had to close actual camp this year, but it's an absolute wonderful program that all of our families have glowing reviews of. So look around and see if there's a Camp Kesem near you. So there are silver linings, and I said this at the beginning. In our survey with parents, more than a third of them wrote that their children became more mature. They said that they became stronger, more independent, more empathetic, and that families increased their connection to each other and found a greater appreciation of life. One parent wrote, "Cancer fast-tracked the growing up process. An appreciation for days and time together was embraced. We no longer complained or focused on things that didn't really matter. We talked more openly and valued family time much more." Another parent wrote, "My daughter is more sympathetic to those who are experiencing a similar situation. It definitely taught her empathy." And one other parent wrote, "We understand the importance now of being in the present and doing what we can when we can as a family." And I had kids tell me this very thing. We also interviewed some teens, and most of them said, "Yeah, I feel like I've gained a lot from my parent having cancer." And some of these teens, their parents died from their cancer, and they even said, "Of course, I want my parent back, but I feel like I've been exposed to a lot more than my friends. And it makes me feel more mature. It makes me feel like I'm a better friend. I can listen better and support people better." So this was coming from the kids themselves. As far as resources, if you are able to connect in Madison here at our clubhouse in Middleton, we're currently closed, but are working on transitioning to in-person programming. For the meantime, we're offering support groups virtually. We're not offering our kid or teen groups virtually, but we are offering groups for parents. So we can, if you live in Wisconsin, we can get you connected to one of our support groups. We also offer healthy living activities, other lectures. So some great resources, and everything we do is free of charge. There's no cost. The Frankly Speaking About Cancer book This book is a free download. If you go to the Cancer Support Community website, I have the link here. You can download this booklet for free and share it with other people. They also have a really great just web page about talking to kids and teens that I highly recommend. They also have some great podcasts, some radio shows about parenting through cancer, being a loved one, how to work with kids, lots of episodes you can go back and share. There's also a helpline that folks can call into. This is a free national helpline for anyone affected by cancer, staffed by professional counselors. I mentioned my Lifeline before, which is also free. It's a way for people to stay connected and create a support team. Also access to discussion boards, open to options, which is an ability to create a question list for your doctor, and lots of other, frankly speaking, topics that you'll find on the Cancer Support Community website. The Cancer Experience Registry is a great way for folks to offer their data that then is being used to inform policy and advocacy and inform research as well. And if you're interested in being a part of some of the advocacy and legislative movements, you can go to the cscadvocate.org. Couple of websites there. Got the Cancer Support Community, Camp Kesem. Cancer Care has a lot of great resources. The Children's Treehouse Climb Program. And before, let's see, we'll go back a couple. I thought, yes, okay, perfect. On this slide, I did include my email. So like I have a great book list that it's just always changing and some other resources. So if you're interested in getting that book list or in learning more about other resources, please email me. I'm always happy to answer other questions. So that is now the question portion. So I'm gonna get out of here just in case I can see people's questions. Any questions that you might have? All right. Again, email address. So if there are questions that pop up, please feel free to email me. Also, we will be uploading this to our YouTube page hopefully in the next week. So if you would like to share this with anyone and any families, please feel free to do that. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening, and thanks for tuning in.
Thanks so much for being here, everyone.
Bye, guys.